Hello and welcome to the C programming lecture on break and continue statements. What are break and continue statements? In C, the break and continue statement are additional ways to control the flow of our particular piece of code. So usually we'll use the break and continue statements inside of things like looping. However, we've seen before we use the break statement in the case of a switch or a switch case statement in order to prevent something called a fall through, which was unintentional. So again, we've seen the break statement already, but this is how we can use the break statement inside of a loop to stop looping with a particular condition. So we can see here that we have a while loop on the left, and that while loop is iterating 100 times, or it should iterate 100 times on the condition of the while loop. However, we have an if statement, and that if statement will execute its scope block with the break statement when x is equal to 5. And we can see in our output on the right that we only iterate over until x is equal to 5, so 6 times. So again, this allows us to break out of the loop and stop iterating, basically short-circuiting our loop. So the continue statement is very similar. However, it allows us to skip additional execution. So you can see in this example that what we're doing is we're assigning the x variable the value 0, and we're looping over it until the value is less than some particular value. So in this case, we're saying 10. And we have an if statement that comes up next. We're checking to see if x is currently divisible by 2, so an even number. Whenever it's an even number, we're continuing over that statement, so it doesn't actually print them out. So we can see here on the right, we only ever print out odd numbers. So a brief review of what continue and break do. They allow us to control the flow of a program. Continue is usually used with a loop statement in order to skip a block of code. The break statement can also give us, it could be used inside of a looping statement, but we've seen it used other places. Again, these don't have to be inside of looping statements, but you will often see them inside of those to short circuit a particular process. Okay, let's get into some examples using the break and continue statements. So first, let's go ahead and do what we normally do, and that is create a main.c file. We're going to go ahead and open that guy up, and we're going to go ahead and write our hello world and compile. Nothing unusual here from the last few steps. It's still the same stuff. So hello world, and we're just going to compile this to make sure everything is running properly. Yep, we're good. Okay, so let's go ahead and start out with the simplest example that we kind of saw inside the slideshow. We're going to make a variable x. Matter of fact, let's make a for loop. So we can do something like this. Well, x is less than 100. We're going to increment x, and we're going to print out x. Now, starting with this, we're going to go ahead and just print out the variable. And let's not create a break statement now. Let's just see what our output is. This is exactly what we should expect. Lots of values to be printed, 0 through 99. So let's go ahead and create a condition. And let's say that something along the lines of, if x is divisible by 10, then we want to print something like this. Else I guess. Well, let's say this. Let's do, instead of doing it this way, let's just say if x equals 10. If x equals 10. We're going to just break. Yeah, we'll just keep it real simple. Break. So we should see the values 0 through 9, because when it hits the 10th iteration, it's going to break before printing out. So this is the 10th iteration, but when it hits the 11th iteration, it will break. So it will not print out 10. Now, if we swap this out here like that, it should be 0 through 10 now. And it is. Okay, so this is how you can use the break statement inside of a looping statement to control basically an exit condition inside of a loop. This is kind of useful, especially when you're doing things like input. For instance, this is just going to be pseudocode because we haven't dealt with how to gain input from the user yet. But you can say something like, let's say we're playing a game, right? So we can set, say, a variable int equal to let's say this variable is, I don't know, we'll just say I, and we say true or 1, and we can say while I is does not equal 0, keep executing this, and then we have some type of gameplay code or something, and then we say, okay, get input it equals, get quit condition or something like this, and maybe we do some type of evaluation here, or better yet, we could just have this be true, and if input equals quit or something. Again, this is pseudocode, this will not actually execute, but if it equals quit, then we break, right? So let's go ahead and take this example and make it come to life by just using our current knowledge of inputs. So we don't really know how to use inputs from keyboard, so we're just going to use variables by saying x. So we'll say int input equals, we'll just say 1, right? And then our quit condition, or we'll say 0, and then input quit is equal to 1 or something along these lines. So we're just basically using bool values. We could switch these to bool, but let's just keep them with integers. So let's make it nice and simple. So we'll delete this. And let's say we're going to execute this loop, and we can say printf playing game or something along these lines. And let's go ahead and make another variable I, so that way we know how many iterations we're going over. So we're going to keep playing the game, and then whenever, if the I variable is equal to, let's say, 10,000, then we're going to exit out of the loop. So we don't actually need these inputs here. We could just break. We can just say break, So it's kind of like this condition. I was trying to set this up to where we could say, okay, well, if the input is equal to some quit, but then really these aren't needed because we're not actually dealing with input. So if we were, we would want to like assign them the variables possibly. So anyways, we're just going to have a loop, and we're just going to keep playing the game. And if it equals this value, what we can do is we can say something along the lines of, let's see, so we can say break. And then what we can do now is we can also say, let's add a continue statement. So if the ith variable is equal to, let's say, 100, and then from here we're just going to print out, let's just add this here, our actual, so we know what iteration we're on. So what we'll do is we'll copy this, and instead of it being a return, basically, just returning and overriding the same line, we're going to create a new line and print out the 100th line. And let's actually just make this 1,000. Yeah, so continue. Let's see what this looks like. Right, so we have a true statement. So this is a good point. This is not defined. So what we want to do is include std bool.h, and then we want to compile and run, and we can see that it's stuck in a infinite loop because in this case we have a continue statement at 100. So what we need to do is actually in here we need to increment I as well and run this, and we can see that we're still getting our looping statement. So the reason why is because we put this increment below the continue statement. So we can still see that it's stuck in an infinite loop. It keeps running. This isn't good. So what we need to do is stop the program, hit Control-C, move this guy up, and recompile the program. And now we should get the expected output. So again, what we're doing here is we're seeing if basically if it equals some variable, right? If it happens so fast you can't actually see this, so maybe we just write a new line and then recompile. Yeah, so now you can see some output, and it's a little too big, so maybe we do 200. Let's just do 101 actually. That way we can see the tail end of the output. So here we go. What we see is that we actually say, okay, at the 100th one, whenever I equals 101, we're going to print this out, increment, and then continue. But the next time through, so this is actually, sorry, this is at 100 here. Then the 101, when we get to here, we print it out, and then we break out of the statement. So we actually are looping until the variable equals 101. Now you could say that this statement is basically the same thing as doing I equals 101. You're basically going to get the same results here. Sorry, so it's kind of the same, except if you notice, I can't put equals. It has to be less than or equal to. So there we go. Right, so I hope this gives you a better understanding of what continue and break do. There's these work, and most oftentimes you'll see them paired with looping statements. You can also see them inside of other conditional statements. For instance, if you had some type of if statement that you wanted to skip over some block of code for some reason or something along those lines, you may see it. But as I've said already, you will most often see them inside of looping statements, typically like this as additional exit conditions or something. But you know, just keep your eye out for this. Mess around with how these statements work. It's easy to also implement these statements inside of a looping statement and do kind of what we did. So for instance, again, putting this increment variable, it will never actually reach this. So, you know, when I compile and run this, it's just stuck in an infinite loop. So if you just keep in mind that you can cause issues like this by just simply having a piece of code that is basically unreachable. Okay, well, thanks for joining me on this lecture, and hope to see you in the next one.